Where's the visual?
5,
Visual.
4,
Does he have a visual?
now.
Just for.
You guys are live.
Thank you. This is a working group meeting consisting of 2 select board members, myself, Marcia Calloway, and Priscilla Vincent, the interim town manager, Brennan Duffy, the treasurer, Cheryl Lindberg, and the interim finance officer, Joyce Hasbrook. And we have one agenda item for this working group session today, which is related to the financial policies and procedures. It is open to the public, and minutes will be taken and published. Any work product which is developed will be provided to the full select board for future deliberations and possible decisions. So with that, what we're going to be working through today is the Vermont League of Cities and Towns Internal Financial Controls Checklist for municipalities. So I'm sort of convening this just because we had talked in the select board about the need to address the issues that were brought up in the audit, and by way of more fully addressing the updating of personnel policies, job descriptions, everything sort of starts with our financial work. And so I had developed a schema, which was in the packet of our meeting, the last select board meeting, I think it was the 29th of March. And the first task was the financial policies and procedures. And the second task under that umbrella was basically to look at this checklist. So I went through the checklist, as I'm sure all of you did, or at least perused through it, and a lot of it is a little bit repetitive because some of the things that apply to one area of financial controls apply to other areas of financial controls. So what I tried to do was do a little distillation, and that's this little packet that I've handed out. I gave you one, yeah. And so on the first page, I put down the basically limited statutory guidance that we have for treasurer and financial officer. And it's sort of sideways for the financial officer, because if you look at that one, it's actually referring to the chair of the select board shall cause to be kept a single record of all orders drawn by the board, showing the number, date, to whom payable, for what purpose, and the amount of each order, and those records shall be submitted to town auditors annually on or before February 1. So in our case, unlike some towns in Vermont, we employ a finance office, and it is staffed, and we also have a treasurer. And if you look in the statutes, there's not a lot, but there's more said about a treasurer, because sometimes that's all towns have, is a treasurer. So I've cited 2 statutes. Cheryl may have another one that she wants to point out too. But basically saying under 24 VSA 1571 that the treasurer keeps an account of monies that's paid to her, paid out by her. Monies are invested with the approval of the select legislative body. The treasurer files quarterly reports with this legislative body, and annually before June 30th has to provide the select board with a copy of the document made available to the auditor pursuant to another statute. And also under 24 VSA 1576, the treasurer pays orders drawn on her by officials authorized by law to draw such orders, and keeps a record of those orders paid on demand in a book kept for that purpose.
It says not paid on demand.
Not paid on demand? I'll have to check that, if it's a negative or not, but that's the statute. Forgive me, I was typing this at 3 a.m. The next page is my attempt at sort of showing the distinction between the select board, the treasurer, and the finance officer. And there's a few statutes there listed that are under select board, and basically the select board has the general supervision of the affairs of the town, etc. The treasurer, under the VLCT checklist, the treasurer and collectors are legally independent from the legislative body and from one another. and have authority to adopt their own financial controls and dictate the use of financial controls by their statutorily appointed assistants. The problem with that is, of course, that things overlap. And so sometimes and that's what we're going to talk about today, how there's an overlap and where it is between the treasurer and the finance office. And some of those things can actually be determined by agreement because the statutes are silent. Under the finance office, yeah.
May I just
Oh, yeah.
interject something? I think this is really helpful and really great. What I think is missing on this is the fact that we're a town manager form of government. And what I feel like already, looking at what all this work you've done, is that under the town manager form of government, they are responsible, the town manager is responsible for all the accounting of the town. And that responsibility is delegated to the finance office, director, office, or whatever, which puts another piece, another column, I think, in your work that you've done.
And I debated that because I
Yeah.
was thinking that on a day-to-day basis, even though the town manager is directing the finance office,
Right.
he's not micromanaging the finance office.
But should be. It should be, because that's where you get to see the work that gets done, so you know that reconciliations of balance sheet accounts are being done. That's the chain that would work to make sure that that is getting done.
Okay,
And
so for getting through this, let's do this.
not to interrupt all that you've done, but
No.
I feel that it's important because the treasurer steps aside in town manager form of government and relinquishes certain responsibilities when there's a select board form of government and the treasurer is the key financial person, or theoretically is, unless the select board chooses to do something different with the town budget. But if the treasurer is capable and able to be the financial officer, they are. And so some of these are changing with the town manager form of government. It reduces the responsibility of the treasurer. As you can even see on the first page, you know, the part about monies being paid into the treasurer, it's in the town manager form of government, it's really paid into the treasury versus the treasurer, because I'm not involved.
Right.
I could be, but in our town, we don't involve me in any of these matters. So I would want to make that point in.
And I think you'll see that we're going to delve into that
in the internal control questionnaire piece.
Because ultimately, you know, I mean, I'm trying to look at this in terms of how we actually function.
Yes.
And I don't know, but you all can explain, how much do you actually say to Brendan, I'm going to do this today? Or do you just do your work? How much do you direct what she's doing?
Minimally. I mean, in our current situation, it's really the finance director is operating the finance department and, you know, conferring from time to time, but not, certainly not a daily review of any kind. Do you agree with that or not?
Yeah.
And I think as we get deeper into this, there's questions to be answered about what we're expecting to see in terms of reports and how they're going to be generated. And at that point, maybe we could be talking about how they go from your office to your office, what you think should be in those reports, and what the select board thinks should be in those reports.
I just want to, you know, if we go back to the town manager form of government and the job description by statute of the town manager, the position is responsible for all accounting. They can delegate that, but it is the town manager's responsibility.
So we will look at the statute for that.
And I agree that the select board should have policies in place so that the town manager is providing what the select board policies are asking to be providing. But the procedures are where we're going to head as well, as to how to fulfill the policies that the select board has determined to be important.
Right.
Okay.
Which is my little box there about the VLCT checklist. that it's to our advantage as a municipality for us all to work together. So, then I attempted on page, the second page of this, to basically outline what I thought looked like finance officer jobs. And I won't read this, but is there anything that strikes you as grossly missing or in error? And you too, Cheryl.
I'm just scrolling over it.
I don't see collecting of tax payments in there.
So that's on the very end of our document here, but let's put that down, collecting tax payments.
There is a job description.
I have it right here.
Yeah, that would probably be a good thing to incorporate.
Yeah, and I didn't intend this to be anything other than a document to help us sort of distill the bigger checklist and maybe focus on the things that really are germane to the two offices and what the select board's looking for. Hi there.
Sorry, I was late. Forgive my tardiness.
Pardon?
Forgive my tardiness.
No. This is a working meeting. It's not, that's all it is, but we're open.
So I would say, I don't know if Joyce mentioned it, but billing and collection of taxes, because that does get done.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I don't see here is managing the grants and the designated fund accounts.
Okay.
I didn't see any kind of, I guess, work with auditor, working with an outside auditor on annual audit reports, which I think.
And there are multiple audits, right? So we have
Multiple audits.
We have the fiscal audit, but we also have audits for different insurance avenues. And there are audits for some of the grant work, depending on who the grantor is for that. So it's multiple auditors, not just the fiscal audit, is what I'm saying.
Okay, that's good to know.
Maybe audit compliance.
Yeah.
Would be catch-all.
Okay. Okay. All right, so then, moving on to the next page, which I've labeled 104, because I'm talking about duties and policies. And I think to sort of get our hands around this whole thing, what I've tried to do is just pick out some of the things, and I've cited, you know, under general controls, page 7A1 is the first one that I'm looking at. Basically, that the select board and the treasurer should jointly adopt accounting, auditing, and financial reporting policies, such as the VLCT's model policy. And if you look at the VLCT website, there's several model policies. And some of those we've actually grappled with. Yeah, and we've got our own that we've in progress and haven't been finalized. So I think now's the time that maybe we should maybe here just say, we think this one needs to be pushed to the top for the select board to get going on and look it over again and finalize it. Because I think it's important that we do have a body of documents going forward that we call our financial policy, especially because we're going to have new employees working with this, and every time an employee comes, they should be given the financial policies, right? Okay, anybody speak up whenever you want to at any time. So any concerns, and just because I've identified these things doesn't mean, you know, if there's something we could do it maybe in order. The first one is the general controls. I've only picked out, well, maybe 6 of those, but if anybody has any that they want to particularly look at.
Can I just
Yeah.
go back 1 minute, sorry, Marcia, to your second page of your document that you just gave us. Under the treasurer column, where it says treasurers and tax collectors are legally independent from the legislative body and from one another and have authority to adopt their own financial controls. and policies. In our town manager form of government, that isn't the case, once again, with regard to tax collection, current tax collection and delinquent tax collection, because our town voted the town manager to be the collector of current taxes and delinquent taxes.
Right.
So that is where there wouldn't be the ability to be independent, because the select board does have a tax collection policy, which has been approved.
Theoretically,
Right, and that again would be a policy of our town that would be followed by the town manager.
Right.
In their doing of those two processes.
And so
That's not really under the treasurer. I understand I have authority in certain ways that could be independent from the select board, but I wanted to point out the tax collection process wouldn't be.
And I wanted to go over that when we get to that
TM.
section.
Yep.
Because there is an intersection, and I'm thinking, when Brennan came, we didn't give you the financial policy for tax collection, did we?
I don't believe so. Don't recall that one.
Okay.
It was soon after I became aware of it. but
Right.
Not immediately.
Okay.
So
Great.
these onboarding things we'd like to fix. All right,
And with that, if I can just make a real quick comment, the only two policies that I have that I've received is the master financial policy, and I scrounged up the delinquent, or the tax collection policy and procedure.
So on the website.
If there are others that are available, I was not provided anything other than these two, is what I'm saying.
There's the personnel policy, right, manual, and then,
what was the first one?
The first one I received is the master financial policy.
which is a bunch of policies. But I found, Joyce, on the website of the town, I was pointed to the direction of the select board. So under boards and commissions, if you go down to the select board, there's and you know, it brings out another level of things. There's select board policies that are there that are not in the master financial booklet.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's things that are not all in the same place.
Yes.
I've been here almost 6 months now, and I'm just learning about this site for those things.
Me too.
One of my prior conversations with Marcia was that there were other policies that had been worked on, but I don't have access to them, that are in a Dropbox or somewhere. So it's just more of that onboarding, that we need some type of a checklist to say, okay, these things are available and needed for this person in this department and in this job, versus these things are needed for this person who works in a different job, to have access to all the pieces, parts that they need in order to do their job.
So my suggestion as we get to this is that we rename that master policy manual, and there's financial policies, personnel policies, and all the other policies in one document, which gets to that same thing. I didn't know they were sitting over there. I know select boards talked about a tax collection policy when Claudette was on the board. I never knew where it went. It's sitting over there on the website. So why somebody didn't incorporate that policy into this book and make it comprehensive is, I was just surprised.
So I'm putting down goals for us, the select board goals and town of Norwich goals. Okay, and we'll just keep track.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that's really step number one, that we need to get into one spot all of the policies that are currently adopted and are working documents to start from for the town before we start bringing things into current standards and current procedures.
Yeah, I was looking at them all on my computer, and I'm not even sure that the board has voted for some of those that they talked about. So I think step number one really is get them voted.
Yes.
And then put them on. So that should be the next outcome.
Policy review should be an annual review. All the select board members, even the new ones, find out what we have, and they are, endorsing them or changing, just like you do your correspondence policy, right?
Right.
Again, another policy sitting out there that isn't incorporated into something.
And just taking this back to the audit, other places when I work, typically the auditors will go on a cycle of asking for different policies for the various entities that they're doing an audit for. And so it should be at our fingertips to give them the particular policy that they're looking for as part of that audit.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. So I pulled off the VLCT model accounting, auditing, and financial reporting policy. And I think maybe if you all would agree, this talks about, it's kind of general, but it talks about independent auditing, financial reporting. I think it would be helpful, let's see, okay, here it is. The purpose of the accounting is to establish and maintain high standards for accounting practices in Norwich. Accounting practices will conform to the general accepted accounting principles for local governments. Auditing is going to happen X number of years, monthly and annual financial reporting. This says the treasurer. In fact, why don't we just look at this right now? And if we could sort of work our way through this, then I could maybe send it round to all of you to sort of bless that that's what we discussed, and we could put it on a select board agenda to get this one approved.
And it's my thought that every one of those policies would start us off without creating, something different and new. We've got this as a resource. They should be put into draft form for our town and, vetted by the select board and anybody else who has, skin in that game, whatever piece it is. And the purchasing policy, they've got all kinds of great policies there.
Right.
To just put them into draft form. Yeah, I know. They're out there. I've given them to the Prudential Committee of the Fire District, and they make it so easy to use them. It's a great starting point.
Well, this accounting thing is only one page.
That's
So
awesome.
But here again, because it's one size fits all, it says monthly and annual financial reporting. The treasurer will prepare monthly financial reports for the select board's management purposes. In fact, here, that would be the finance office, right?
The town manager. Again, depends on who you wish to hear from.
Well, I mean, the finance office.
That's who's producing it right now, currently. So if you want to make your policy with what we're currently doing, that would be the finance office, yeah.
So the finance office will prepare monthly financial reports for the select board. Budget report showing revenues collected and appropriations expended for the previous month with a variance from the budget amounts for each line item. So is that possible?
That's what we're doing now, because that's comparing actuals to budget, and we actually have a percentage in the workbook. It's not possible out of NEMRIC, but it is possible pulling the data from NEMRIC and adding those percentages in.
So this keeps coming up, and I think it's a good place to talk about it right now. And anybody jump in, because I'm just sort of rolling here. But NEMRIC is our system of record into which our data goes. But help us understand, because a lot of the things in this checklist talk about subledgers, right? So we have NEMRIC, and do we have subledgers?
NEMRIC has some subledgers, yes.
NEMRIC has them.
Yes.
Okay. And can you reconcile the general ledger with, and correct me if I'm using the wrong terminology, but I'm thinking of there's a general ledger and then there's subledgers. Can you reconcile those two?
Yes.
And when you do that and you press a button, you don't get it in an Excel spreadsheet, you get it in a PDF?
Most times it comes out as a PDF, and you pull a report from one module and compare that with a report from another module and look at those two together. So you're comparing like an AP transaction list. What have we paid to the AP for all the different GL numbers? And then you look at the GL and you say, yep, I can see that same dollar amount is on my GL. So the AP subledger balances with the general ledger, which is everything.
And to get that into a consumable document for the select.
Which just automatically gives it as the format that is previewed on the screen. You can also pull it out, most things, as an Excel, but it's a CSV file, which is an old version of Excel. And then that report comes out into a regular Excel spreadsheet, which is what I use to produce the reports, to be able to put the dollars and cents and the percentages and stuff like that, the subtotals, other calculations in there.
Okay, so you're never like copying and pasting into Excel?
No.
Okay.
That is good to know.
So what I would like clarification on is, so there is a budget status report that comes out of NEMRIC, which shows the current year to date with a budget percentage calculation. And if the budget column is completed, would show those items. The revenue budget is not in here, so I don't know how you could pull a report out of NEMRIC to an Excel spreadsheet with revenue figures if they're not in NEMRIC. But the expenditure budget amounts are all in the NEMRIC module.
Any financial system is as good as the data that goes in, is what the data comes out.
Well, I'm sorry, say that again?
I said any financial system runs on the data that goes in is what comes out. So if something's not entered into the system, then it's not going to come out of the system. So in that case, no one has ever entered the revenue, projected revenue for this fiscal year into NEMRIC.
Yes, and I agree with that, but all the expenditures got put in.
That's correct.
So how do we keep track of the revenue?
So, Mike, oh, can I just finish? So if you've got a report that you're pulling from NEMRIC to a spreadsheet, how are you getting revenue figures from the NEMRIC database if they are not in there?
I am pulling the current stuff and I'm pulling the budget out. So the reports that I am giving you, if you're looking for the current report, is that what you're looking for? Or are we talking about NEMRIC in whole?
We're talking about just the system.
The finance.
Okay, NEMRIC in whole. If we're talking about NEMRIC in whole, NEMRIC, I can pull data out of NEMRIC in an Excel spreadsheet as it's put in.
Okay.
But then you're presenting it in an Excel spreadsheet that has got revenue figures to show it against budget.
So the question is, where's the
For
revenue?
the current year, that is true.
Right, so where do those revenue figures get?
They were put into the workbook from the town report.
So they were entered there, but they were not entered in here, which would be a simple add to the NEMRIC general ledger module. Under the budget maintenance, it would be simple to add those revenue amounts.
So there's
Someone
a
could
procedure.
add those in, yes. So,
Okay, so there's a procedural thing.
Okay.
Um,
and that is part of the implementing a budget into NEMRIC. Because my understanding of entering a budget into NEMRIC is it's all done at one time, which is something I'm looking to start doing because we now have an approved budget for fiscal '24. So we need to enter that into the system.
So accounts receivables, would that be the same as revenue?
Accounts receivable is the money that comes in, yes.
Okay, so that's under control, and if you look at page 2, accounts receivables recorded in the general ledger. At the moment, the answer to that is no. That would be page 2, and it's down, almost down below the midway point.
D?
D, controls over accounts receivable and collections. So I'm wondering, if we're not doing that now, how would we go about doing that? If we're not entering it in NEMRIC?
We are entering it in NEMRIC.
Oh, we are?
Cheryl's just asking about the budget. The budget lines for the revenue are not in NEMRIC currently for fiscal '23. All revenue is entered into NEMRIC.
Yeah,
The
because the
actual money
actual
that
is
comes
coming
in.
out here, but there's nothing next to it. If it did have it in there, then the budget status report would be an actual year-to-date compared to budget with a percentage of variance of those two numbers. Don't have to calculate anything. The system would have calculated that.
So
That's all.
that's a different presentation than what we have currently been presenting, because we currently present the prior year with the current year, so we have a tracking or comparison for that. NEMRIC doesn't have that ability, as far as I know.
Yeah,
Well, so I'm trying to get my head around this. So if NEMRIC is our system of record, and right now I'm picturing it like a checkbook. I don't put my budget in the checkbook. And it sounds like you're saying the budget should be in the checkbook.
But it's all part of this module and all part of the benefit of the system with each module. And just to clarify, when you do payables over here in the payables module, there's a step at the end for each month end saying transfer over to general ledger. That's how the numbers get over there. Payroll at the end of the month, there's a button for transferring payroll data over into general ledger. They send it over, the modules speak to general ledger, and they all feed towards there so that you have your town records in the general ledger module. We're just missing the budget column for revenue, and then we would have a report that would be able to be generated to show the select board a really simple presentation of the finances.
So what you're doing is getting that information in there, but a different way.
In there where?
And, well, when you make a presentation to us on a monthly basis that says this is how much money you've got left, is that including what we're anticipating for revenue?
Yep.
And so you're getting it from a different place. You're just not using the module for it in NEMRIC.
I'm taking the actual data out of NEMRIC and putting it into the tracking workbook, so I can pull it into that dashboard to do your calculations for your, all those pie charts and everything is pulled in from that Excel workbook that is created using the NEMRIC data. So the report comes out of NEMRIC as an Excel format and goes into that workbook to pull into all of those dashboard data.
Right. So I guess what it comes down to is what the select board, for us, what the select board wants to see, right? And so in the past, the select board liked the pie charts and that display, which I gather was presumably the last financial officer was using workbooks.
Yes, I have not changed any processes for that since I've been here. I just inherited and have kept it going.
Okay. And so that might be, I mean, to the extent that the select board is saying we want to see X, then that's what you're going to produce for us. I don't know, and this is another question, I guess, for how we operate, but how many people have data entry ability in NEMRIC?
It depends on the module. So the finance module, I believe it's only Ashley and I to do like accounts payable, accounts receivable. The town clerk has receivable access, so that she puts in deposits. Reporting, Cheryl can go in and run reports. Lister's office goes into NEMRIC, into the Lister's module. So there's different modules that different people have access to. And some of those modules interact with the finance, the GL module, some of them don't.
And there's a module for putting in a budget.
The module for the budget is in the GL module.
General ledger.
Yep.
The general ledger is the air traffic controller, if you will, building. Payables, payroll, cash receipts are all filtering to it. If the buttons to say transfer over for the monthly information is connected,
Right.
then that's how it happens. In terms of financial modules, the finance office has the passwords. All I have for one is the general ledger, and I have read access only. I have no access to any of the other modules in the financial area. And then the listers have the grand list module that we allow access to the finance office and the town clerk. So there's those types of.
And the town clerk has, I don't have that in my head, like 5 different modules, I think, that they use out of NEMRIC.
That are solely handled by the town clerk.
Right.
Licenses, checklist, And I'm not sure she's using any of the other ones.
Yeah, I
think
don't remember, that's what I said. I
Bonnie-
don't remember how many
Bonnie
she
has
uses,
access.
but there's several different modules in NEMRIC that different parts of the town use. There are also other NEMRIC modules that are available that the town doesn't use.
Right.
So it depends, to answer that question, who has access to NEMRIC, it has to depend on which module it is you're talking about, and whether that module has interactions with the general ledger accounts, which is where the financial reporting is. But all the financial reporting modules are managed through the finance office.
So there's no access by the treasurer to anything financially related for the town of Norwich other than read access to the general ledger.
Okay.
And that gets me report, it gives me report access is all it gives me.
So when you've seen the reports that the select board liked that were coming from the financial office, do you think that they are different from this report in terms of accuracy?
You're asking me that question?
Yes.
Oh, well, again, I brought NEMRIC to Norwich, so I felt very comfortable with the interaction of modules and how this software company helps many towns in Vermont, handle their books. So it would be, since we did pay for these modules and they are our basis of our record keeping, I would like to see that this general ledger module is kept up to date with all of the information that our town has. So it would be my hope that this, revenue budget columns of information could be easily added in to the module and produce a report that could easily be helpful to do a quick look of how the year-to-date looks. Then you've got your balance sheets, you've got your fund reports. You can run a report for any of the funds. They're all, you just click the little arrow down and you can go to fund number 12 and print a report for there. This is the general fund, so you click for 01 and you print a report. It makes it very easy to move around if the system it has all the information in it that it should have.
But do you think that the reports that we've been getting, are they inaccurate?
Are they inaccurate? Boy, I would say that I have some questions about some of the accounts that are in the reports, yes, with regard to the numbers. I haven't looked at this and compared it to the one that's in the last packet, which I could do and see if I see anything different.
Okay.
I can't say that I hope not. I'm guessing when Joyce talks about pulling and using, she's pulling this actual column of information out.
The actual expenditures.
But then moving it over to an Excel spreadsheet, not using a NEMRIC reporting function. Right.
Well,
I'm pulling it out of NEMRIC as an Excel instead of a PDF, which is what you've got there.
yeah, so it's, she has a choice. She can choose Excel or she can choose PDF, and she's choosing Excel. The only difference, as I'm understanding it, is that any budget information is going into the workbook as opposed to NEMRIC. Is that?
Well, the revenue, only the revenue projections were not entered into NEMRIC. I don't know why they weren't entered into NEMRIC. But the revenue expenses budget was, the expense budget was entered, but not the revenue projections for fiscal '23. I don't know why, that's just what I inherited. But the workbook had the budget, all the budget, revenue and expenses.
So then you should be able to produce the report that she's looking for with the budget listed.
No, because the revenue projections for fiscal '23 are in the Excel workbook that is used to create those dashboard reporting. The revenue projections for fiscal '23 are not entered into NEMRIC.
Okay. And is
The
that
report I pull out of NEMRIC is an Excel, gives me the current year-to-date and monthly expenses and revenue.
okay? So what do you think, is that efficient to enter it in there? Would it be Would it be more efficient than?
It certainly should be entered, and when I train somebody to do the FY24 budget, definitely they need to be entered in there.
Okay, so the revenue projections in the future.
And that's just a general process. I mean, we're talking about where our processes are wrong right now.
Yep,
But we're talking, I thought this meeting just is to go to create processes.
Yep.
Not get off on side trails of things that we need to do. We know that there's a lot of things that the finance department needs to catch up on.
yeah.
And that's what
I
I've been
mean-
doing for 6 months, but we're not there yet. We've got a
And the
long
other
ways
thing
to
this is
go.
for is to educate us.
Right.
Because,
And the other thing with NEMRIC, I've worked with a lot of different financial softwares, and NEMRIC is very antiquated, and it is not up to speed with its competitors. However, the town is kind of trapped into using NEMRIC because the state of Vermont uses that, and so that's the reporting parameters that the state has worked on. So I feel it's advantageous for the town to actually pull the reports out into an Excel format that can be used to create other dashboard items to give more visibility for that data that's really working.
okay.
There are always safeguards that can be put in to make sure that a Excel workbook balances with another report, and there's checks and balances. Every time I set up a workbook, I always have checks and balances to make sure that everything is balanced in there. So that's just standard operating procedure for a finance department, is to rely heavily on Excel. It goes to the point that
And those are the workbooks you're talking about.
those are the workbooks I'm working, yeah, because that's just standard. You don't get through training for an accounting job anymore, where it used to be you trained how to do all the columned ledger sheets with pen and paper. Now you have to be trained on Excel, so that you know how to write formulas, you know how to do charts, you know how to do tables, you know how to do all that stuff. That's just standard financial practices anymore.
Makes sense.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
I think,
At the same time, I know that select boards around the state of Vermont struggle with financial statements, and that part of their responsibility as a select board. So the simpler, the better. And that I've reached out to many a town about this simple budget status report, which many of them use. And I think NEMRIC could provide you with some good information on how they allow you to export out, to do everything you want to do, but get your information into NEMRIC, and it'll be more valuable out there. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to update a second set of books. You're working straight from the data in NEMRIC's general ledger module. And
it sounds like the only thing we're missing is the revenue projection, and that can be done when we have new people and more bandwidth.
I could do it for the town in 15 minutes if I was able to get into the ledger, into the module. I would set that in there in less than 15 minutes.
Well,
So there's
that's
an
up to
offer.
up to the finance office, but let's get into the
It's
rest
up
of
to the
this.
town
Let's go
manager,
back.
really.
Well, and I think I'll let the town manager say how he wants to handle this.
Yeah.
You know, whether you want to let her, sorry, 3 o'clock in the morning. My dog got me up and I didn't go back to bed. So that sort of working relationship that you have, I think the two of you need to decide how you're going to do things and how you feel comfortable with information being entered into the system and who's going to do it. So I'll leave that with you. All right, so now let's try and zoom through these. We've got an hour and 15 minutes left, and I'm hoping that when we get through this, we can potentially write up some pretty crystallized ideas about how things are going to be changed, if at all, and what needs to be folded into personnel policies, and what policies we might want each office to write up. So the second one under general controls is distribute policies to new employees and elected officials. I think we have all agreed here to, what?
Page one
Just on page one of 4.
Yeah, sorry. It's under the duties and policies. I think we've all agreed that that's a goal that we want to to achieve, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great,
You guys,
very important.
okay. Agreed. The fraud policy, I think that's something that the select board has to update and distribute, and we haven't done that lately, and I think we should do that.
Yep.
On page 9 of the checklist, A6 is a report regarding actual revenues versus and expenses versus budgeted. We've just talked about that, so I think that one's done. Page 10, A8, segregated duties for all related elements of a financial transaction. So I thought that was an interesting one. If anybody's had a chance to look at that, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
So your page reference is the control.
It's the control checklist. So it says,
So I can talk to this just kind of generally. This would also be referred to as segregation of duties, so that no person does everything as far as financials go. So here at the finance department, the staff accountant manages the day-to-day transactions as in entering invoices to be paid that come from the department managers. So the department managers get the invoices and approve them, and then Ashley enters them, prints the checks, and then the checks are signed by the treasurer. Money that comes in, either the tax collector brings the money in, the solid waste department brings in money for somebody dropping off the refrigerator, or we actually have people stopping in at the door to deposit checks for taxes. So those come in from those different revenue streams. All of those go over to Ashley, who makes the deposit into the bank. The bank statements are reviewed by me and Cheryl. Any transactions from either AP that are processed against the general ledger and or payroll and or cash receipts are all reviewed by me as they are entered into the general ledger, and we have reports for those. So there is segregation of duties on all of those fronts. So those are in the processes that we're currently doing, but I don't think it's documented anywhere. So that's a part of, right, that would be a part of that would need to go in there.
and the next, and Cheryl, I'm gonna come back to you, but the next one, A9, is cross-training. So that brings up, if you're not there, or the person who sits in your seat, then who checks Ashley?
And that is where we have a hole right now. Because I'm not trained to do what Ashley does, and Ashley's not trained to do what I do. But that does need to happen, so that there is overlap and there is cross-training, because I believe no man is an island. Everybody should have someone who knows how to do their duties.
Yeah.
And can step in for them.
Okay.
So
Cheryl, segregated duties.
So A6 was the first one that's the one you mentioned? I wrote, my notes say that, does the select board regularly receive? Yes, but do you review them? No. In my opinion, the select board, when receiving financial reports, does not spend enough time to go over those financial reports and discuss them. And I feel like that's something that I'm disappointed that there isn't some more discussion by the select board of what I feel is one of your most important responsibilities. And making sure, maybe everybody's looked at them and there's no questions, maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel like there's not enough of a review of those reports at the select board level, which I'd like to see, but it is helpful, and it's great that they're coming monthly. I mean, there's no doubt about that. That is really a good spot to be in.
I mean, I guess it would be helpful if the town manager's office and the finance office and the treasurer's office could point out things, you know, in those reports that I know you've done that just recently, and we're going to be bringing it up at the select board. And so that kind of a notice, hey, pay attention to this. Maybe there can be a way to highlight those things that you think need attention. Sound good? And Cheryl, you usually attend, but if you aren't going to be there, you could send a note to be included, you know, I'd like the board to understand this about that particular item on the report.
Right, and again, you know, if you're looking at a year-to-date document of budget to actual, and something, and you're 6 months into the year, then you look at and say, okay, these should be 50%, or if they're not, why? And okay, over here, you're gonna see 100% because we paid that up front. We paid it in the first month of the fiscal year, it's 100%, now it's gonna be 100% the rest of the year. So you have those places within these financial reports where you can understand why something is already 100% or 75% or 50%, but to know that your expectations are, if you're reading these reports, what are we going to be looking like in another 3 months? What do we see as the future of our current financial reports? How do we see it, you know? And this is where you get right now, you're at the end of 3 quarters, so it's a real critical point, right? You got 3 months left to balance the books so we don't overspend, we don't have a deficit.
And
are we going to be able to do that? And what are how are we going to get to that? Are we going to cut back here?
You'll be proud of us because at the last meeting, Brennan brought that to our attention and we had a full and fluffy discussion about how we were going to manage. And the board said, carry on. So that's what we did. So I think we're beginning to get to that stage, but it's good to bring it up.
Yeah,
and that's where I would suggest that as snapshots, other places I've worked, those Excel workbooks that give those pie charts or those snapshots are easy to pull together so that instead of just having one dashboard that gives you your 5 pie charts and your graph at the bar graph at the bottom, you could have other charts that say, well, where are we on our overall spending? Or where are we with our fund account spending? Where is, whatever those need to look like, whereas all of that data is now available to you to pull whatever charts and graphs you need to track.
And maybe that's a way for you to point our attention to things, maybe have some graphs that you always show, but then if there's something that you're particularly wanting us to flag, just have a pie chart for that. Is that difficult to?
No, it's not difficult to do.
Okay.
But it's just, here again, it brings us full circle to what does the select board want to see for their reports?
Right.
Because I realize that all the select board people are not finance savvy people. I mean, they're people that are here working to help to drive the town, and each have their own strengths, be it legal, be it business management, be it whatever. That they don't necessarily know all the nuances of a financial statement. Where those key pieces and those charts make it easy for something to just jump at you when it's really out of whack. So
I think that's one thing we can bring back to the board and see what they want to see. Right.
And then that's where it should drive whatever policies, because part of the policies or procedures would be, okay, what reports are we going to present to the select board? Do you want certain monthly reports, and do you want extra reports at a quarter? Like, for instance, the one I can think of that makes more sense to make sure you have a good quarterly report on is those fund balances, because all the funds don't change every month like the regular operating expenses do, but certainly to have a good finger on, where are we with our fund balances? Have we expended all of that we had in there for our budget for this year, or are we tracking somewhere else? The same thing with grant spending. Each department has grant lines, would be quarterly. How are we tracking with that? Do we have expenses that are out there that we're going to get reimbursed for, that we have the expenses showing, but we don't have the money coming in yet? So that's part of what our imbalance is. With us doing more grant writing, you would want to be able to see that. What does that look like?
Okay.
So, yeah.
I think getting information into the general fund that may not be complete from the revenue side and the expense side means that our expenses are higher than they really should be showing, which is misleading the select board into thinking that you have this much of expenditures already expended, when in fact it's not the correct scenario. Another point I would bring out if I was reviewing these with the select board is to say, and by the way, over here under grants, there's $134,800 in the actual column on a grant payment, but we're expecting to get all that back or whatever it is. So this is inflating your bottom line number. So you're looking at a report that's not, and there's some other questions about some of these designated funds that have more in the actual column than is budgeted to be placed into that designated fund. So something is wrong there, but that again is almost $10,000 more in expense under the actual column than should be there. So that's inflating your expenditure total. So there's just a highlighting of a few things in here.
Right, plus we have the complicated late audit. So all of those prepaids and accruals and deferred revenues that we put in to correct or adjust the ending 21 didn't get entered into the system until, or cleared from the system until January, February, March. I just did some more this month to get all the 22 audit stuff done, whereas normally that would be done by September at the latest.
Right.
So yeah, so that's complicated our financial statements as well for this year. Hopefully next year that won't be, because I'm getting stuff now ready.
And it would even be best if, if those reversals are done in the first period of the new fiscal
Correct.
year. It actually should be done in July. If that person that did the accruals now does the reversals,
Right.
you're getting them into the correct year
Correct.
as soon as possible.
Yep.
And the auditor shouldn't be needing to provide adjusting journal entries for that. It would be automatically
Well, hopefully
done.
this was a difficult and exceptional year.
Mm-hmm.
So Cheryl, can I
Yeah.
ask you about the segregated duties for your office?
I don't have an office. Well, so it does make me, think about this whole piece about the annual vacations. I mean, Ashley certainly needs to be able to take a vacation, and if no one else knows how to do her position, how does she accomplish that?
But for you too, how does it work if you're not here?
I have an assistant treasurer. I have a couple of assistant treasurers that take over when I'm not in town.
Okay. So you do have segregation.
I do.
Good.
I actually have 3 assistant treasurers now, but
Who are the treasurers, the assistant treasurers now?
the assistant treasurers are Elaine Waterman and Maria Elise Young, both of whom I appointed the day after I was elected in March. And
So the second one.
Marie Elise Young. And for the school district, I have Pam Smith as an assistant treasurer on the school district side, along with Elaine. But I guess that's information you don't really need, but that's the rounded. So I have 2 for the town and 2 for the school district. So when I'm not around, somebody has the ability to at least sign checks, although most of my aways are physically and I'm not unconnected.
Right.
I'm just not physically here, but I need someone to sign checks,
Right.
which is the point.
So you have no problem with cross-training?
Correct. I do work on that with them, and fortunately, I've had some long-term assistants now that I'm training Maria Elise. Ashley got to meet Maria Elise, and we explained to her that I was training Maria Elise with payable checks and things for the town. Just
Okay.
recent, so I've been working with her too.
The only thing is, I don't know how to say this tactfully, but it would be good, I mean, you have been the town treasurer as well as treasurer for a very, very long time. And your cohort of assistant treasurers, I think you're all sort of in the same age cohort, and you all might want to retire at about the same time. So it would be kind of nice to
We all could
start.
drop dead.
Yeah, well, we could all be hit by one of those stupid cars crossing in front of Tracy Hall when the pedestrian lights are going. Yeah, no, but it would be awfully nice if somehow we could find some people who might want to keep doing it for the next 20 years too.
So Priscilla, I work on that every day.
Sure you do.
I have been at parties, meeting younger people that live in this town and ask them if have they any interest in financial matters of this town. they have a financial background? I am looking at every 40-year-old, give or take 5 years, to take on an assistant role that I can work with over the next 3 years. And I'll start posting that on the listserv, because I think it's a very true statement that there needs to be some younger people stepping up.
Okay.
So
Keep moving here. B.
Succession planning. But I am concerned about Ashley, and if anything should happen to her, as we were about Becky, who was doing everything alone in that office for way too long. I don't know what the plan is.
That's why we're here. We're going to be talking about it.
Right.
General control, B, controls over financial records. Written documentation of accounting procedures. So, Cheryl, do you have any accounting procedures that you need to have written up? And while you're thinking,
I can answer that while she's thinking. I have been documenting procedures since I got here. We are not there yet. We still have more that have to be documented. I was also able to pull some procedure documentation for member processes for various modules that we use in the finance department. Those are old and outdated, but at least it gives us a stepping point to start using some of those for processes that we do. And I will continue to write more documents until I'm not here anymore. So we're working on it, but we're not there yet.
So there's probably some procedures that I do perform that I doubt have ever been incorporated, because they're changes that occurred over the last 4 or 5 years, very specific to when it involves the banking side. So without putting our banking procedures to the world, we could probably generalize what I do is to what I do and not be specific. Again.
or, I mean, there are some things that may be excluded from open.
Policy procedures,
Well,
you know, there could be just, the treasurer does this or something, and it doesn't get into any more detail that I would want to have my assistants know how to do.
Right.
But not the world to know how to do that. And procedures, I probably don't need to be public.
No, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, the
And they
policy
could be
should be public, but not the
Right.
procedure.
just for your office.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the town should know where they are.
okay.
Okay.
So,
I'm making notes for stuff. Page 11, useful and descriptive chart of accounts listing names with a system of recording revenues and expenditures. So I know there's been a lot of questions asked by one select board member about why things are coded or classified in certain ways. Do we have that kind of descriptive chart of accounts?
We have a chart of accounts that lists the names, so that's the second one that's there. Useful and descriptive, that's kind of a subjective answer, I guess, because the wording of some of the names on the accounts makes sense to one person, but not necessarily someone else. But given the number of characters that you can put in the name of an account, there needs to be some descriptions below that. NEMRC allows you the ability to put a description on any GL account when it's created, but most of ours in our system do not have a description on them.
Could we have a glossary?
I don't know what you mean by.
What do you mean by glossary?
Well, like if there's 4-letter codes for something.
Yes. So I can get you a little bit more on that, because our general ledger accounts are all made up of, the fund is first, so the first 2 digits represents the fund. The second digit represents the type of account it is, whether it's an asset, whether it's a liability, whether it's a asset fund, net asset, whether it's a revenue, or whether it's an expense. And then the first 3 digits of the 6 set group represents the department. And then the second set of 3 represents the section in that department where the expense is going to be. So it might be bank interest on the revenue side is 610, for instance. So,
Is this
or
all, is
810.
this all written
I guess
down
it's-
in like a cheat sheet somewhere?
I
You can
could.
print out a
I
chart of
could.
accounts, and you could see all the account numbers and their names next to them from a chart of accounts.
Yes, you can do that, but to create the cheat sheet, I could do that as well, because the chart of accounts is set up according to standard accounting practices, so that's not a problem, with the exception of the fund accounts, which didn't get moved into the 2016 new accounting standards. So that's the piece that the audit was referring to, that I'm working on to reclass those.
Okay.
And I actually sent an email off to NEMRIC to ask how to do that in NEMRIC. I have not heard back from them yet, but I asked, how to code it so we could run reports out of NEMRIC according to the new standards. So I'm waiting to hear back from them. But in lieu of getting anything from them, I can still do that on a spreadsheet, run those balances in, get them regrouped like what the audit has them grouped for committed, uncommitted, permanent, et cetera.
Nice.
And a sub below that. So I've got that well underway, and whether it gets into NEMRIC by the time I leave or not, I'll at least have you a workbook that can be reported to the select board on the different funds, so we represent it like it is in the audit.
Great, and maybe there could be that chart someplace so that people
I could
could see
create
it.
that.
That's neat that the audit identified that. That's good.
I know, well, I worked with the auditors on that because I knew that they hadn't gone into the new standards just by the wording on it. So going back to the chart of accounts and the wording and the naming of the things, that's going to be a new cheat sheet that I'm going to put out there for you guys to start calling the funds by the right names.
Great.
Whether it's designated, it shouldn't be designated. They're all net asset funds. And then they just have a different subgroup, whether it's committed or, and if it's committed for a project versus, and how it's donated versus appropriated funds, and how do you expend that? Is that expended by the voters, or is that expended by the select board who tells the town manager to do this? So that's all in the works for the fund accounting.
I would love to see the select board get a copy of that. And in fact, as you're talking, I'm thinking what we need is sort of a select board manual, right? That can explain stuff.
I'm working on that too.
Nice.
Because the other piece that goes with that, and I was actually reading town reports back to, 1998, I think, looking for the setup of those designated funds to know what their purpose is, because that's the other thing that's gray. When I got here, I said, well, what am I supposed to spend out of this one fund? What are the appropriate types of expenses? And they said, just go by the name of it.
Hello.
The name of the fund. So that, drop it off, read up bags.
Go ahead.
Just going by the name of the fund is not necessarily clear enough to know what expenses should come from that fund.
Okay.
So that's the other piece that I'm trying to put into that document, that I can have that for you guys.
That'll be very
And,
helpful.
and Marcia, over the years, I have repeatedly asked the select board to specify the nature of the fund, to what specific expense belongs to that fund, and it's just never been done. And there's, the continuation of that, you go to the state statute to setting up a reserve fund, it says for a specific purpose, not some gray, well, if we're over, or if we need more money, well, no, specifically what.
Right,
And-
that's where we're headed.
And 5 select board members might say, this is what that meant, and the next 5 will say, no, it means this. But if it's very specifically written, nobody gets to make a different decision. It is the worst
where we're
part of
headed.
what we have.
We're gonna get there.
All right, page, gosh, it says only page 2. So referring to page 11, I've got items B4 and B5. This is about computerized accounting system, which allows timely recording of financial transactions, easy viewing of transaction data, and timely creation of financial reports. I think we've been through that, so done. Page 12, B7, subsidiary ledgers for tax receivables, accounts payable, and when reconciled. We kind of touched on this, that there are subsidiary ledgers and when they are reconciled, right? Because you're doing that routinely?
Yes.
Are you doing monthly reconciliations of the balance sheet accounts?
The balance sheet accounts, I have started, when did I start that? December, I think? When I got here, there was no month-end process. And so I've started implementing that. So as I've gone through this stuff, I've worked on ticking those off. So I am doing subsidiary reconciliations for AP, payroll, and the bank. All the bank statements are all done at the end of every month now. And the revenue, I reconcile the recreation fund receipts. And right now I'm working on getting the fund accounts reconciled through March, which I should be able to finish as soon as I get the bank statement from Cheryl, so I can get the current month interest in there. And then I've got a process worked out that I can do grant reconciliations
the bank
with
statement?
Miranda. Yay.
Recorded on record.
That's my work then.
I
So
leave it to her promptly.
yep. So those are being reconciled. The other one that I have to do is the taxes, just to make sure that the taxes receivable and the delinquent taxes and the penalties and all of those things reconciled. And I'm going to work on that next in my reconciliations once I get through March in the quarterly filings for that. So my thought is to reconcile the taxes twice a year, once after the first payment is due. So next year it'll be September, we do that reconciliation. And then again, once the final payment is due, just to make sure that that works. And because that has to be reconciled before the audit gets done, and we want to have that done before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. Is there a way to be able to review? I know that when Roberta, I was going to get to that quickly here. When Roberta was here, she gave me the month-end bank reconciliation every month. She just stuck it in the treasurer's mailbox. I'd like to start that again.
Okay.
To get that month-end, because I need to do a quarterly investment report to the select board, and that would sort of help me get that March.
So that's
balance.
something that needs to be written into the processes, because I had no idea,
Yeah.
you know, but that's just something that would need to be documented. And yeah, as soon as I usually,
Well,
the
I
week after I get the statements, I usually have the bank statements done now, because I've got all the back catch-up stuff done.
Well, to Marcia's point and all, I think that if there's the known fact that the finance office has to do balance sheet reconciliations, then the town manager gets them to show that they've been done and reviews them, being responsible for all the accounting. And that would make sense, that here's the accounts payable reconciliation, here's the accounts receivable reconciliation, and look them over and notate you've seen them and that they're getting done.
So the board doesn't need to see them?
No, it's,
No.
Okay.
that's where I go back to your column. I think the column that's missing is town manager throughout this, a lot of work you did.
Okay. All right. And then that goes to.
Certainly the select board can ask if the town manager has seen that they've been done. You could ask that question, but I don't think you want to get into.
And that would be quarterly, correct? No, yours is
Monthly.
coordinating. This is monthly.
Monthly.
Okay. Now we're down to controls over cash. Page 14C1 says the select board, the treasurer, the tax collector jointly should adopt a cash receipts policy such as the VLCT model policy.
And I believe we have that, because there is in the master financial policy booklet, there is a cash receipt policy.
Yes.
Is that what it's called, Joyce?
Yes.
One
That
of
is
the-
in here. I think that just needs to be reviewed.
Yes, I think
I
it
mean,
does.
everything, I think, in this finance policy just needs to be reviewed, because it includes specific dollar amounts for some things, and I just think we need to make sure that those dollar amounts don't need to be amended for our current times.
Okay.
You know, but,
Yeah, and I agree with that, and that it needs updating. In fact, I know for a fact that there's people accepting money for the town that aren't identified in the policy. And I also didn't understand why the treasurer wasn't part of the persons that can accept money on behalf of the town or whatever, because I am bonded, which is a requirement of the town for every treasurer
Well,
throughout the state.
the model policy lists everybody and his brother to do
Which
it.
you can narrow down. You can narrow
Cemetery commissioners.
That's why I think that we just need to take our current policy and just review
Update
it
it.
and update it.
Okay,
As all policies should be reviewed every
okay,
year.
so we'll go through that, and I'll start those things and pass them to the board. Okay, next.
Or accounts receivable.
Accounts receivable, this is under controls over accounts receivables and collections. Accounts receivables are recorded in the general ledger. True?
They should be.
Good. Page 18, D5, subsidiary ledgers are reconciled to the general ledger control account on a regular basis. We've been over that, they are. So that's a yes. Page 18, D6, account receivables reconciled to the detailed invoices and receipts on a regular basis. Is that true?
We receive the invoices from the departments, and then we add them in. We don't do a full reconciliation except at audit time, and the auditors always make selections of a certain number of invoices and payables from different sections where they do an overall check of that.
Okay.
So our internal reconciliation of that would be the town manager and the head both review and sign off on the receipts that are be paid. And then I think that the treasurer sees that information when you sign the checks. Is that correct, Cheryl? Do you see the back end documentation for in the invoices when you get the checks to sign?
I'm not sure I'm following your, so how,
Do you get a copy
so
of
how
the
is a
invoice with the
receivable
check?
something I would sign a check for?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm thinking payables, sorry. No, receivables, no, receivables come into the office. And then those are reconciled to whatever outstanding receivables we have. So most of that would be either grant or insurance claims or rebates from transfer station.
Or what about the police department doing certain tasks that they bill for? Do they ever provide you with an invoice to put into the system that you would subsequently receive a payment for that would get the receivable off the books? Or are all of those things handled off the books?
I don't get anything from the police department to say we've got a receivable. I just get the money that comes in from the state, and I go to the online portal to get the payment that the state has made, and then I just code it from that payment receipt.
So there are activities that occur in the police department, I can think of, and in zoning where somebody is requesting a service and they have to pay a fee for that. So my thinking is that that invoice that's created by that department or that service, however it looks, a permit or a police department invoice, doesn't get sent to you to say, hey, here's an invoice we're trying to collect for having, done this service.
No, and even when the town clerk collects money for stuff, we don't get any proof of what's been collected. We just get a deposit report that comes out of the system, but we don't get any backup paperwork for that.
So essentially, the departments are handling their own little accounts receivable scenario until they get the money, which means that department would have to go after that person to get their money if they don't pay it, in 30 days or something. So it's sort of handled departmentally, where in fact, I know in bigger cities and all that wouldn't be the case because there'd be so many more of them with so many more dollars that a police department would funnel 15 invoices a day to the finance office and say, we're trying to collect these, and then maybe the finance office would be responsible to making sure they get paid, and then the payment would come to the finance office. But what I believe is happening is that the department is handling it until they get their payment. and giving it over to the finance office once collected.
Brennan, what do you think about that? Should that be sort of corralled?
I'm not sure if it's a problem at this point. I've never really thought about how that works on a day-to-day basis, to be honest.
I think we're trying to avoid problems.
And I think that I would want to quantify that. I mean, how many transactions are we talking about? How much dollars are we talking about?
Right. It
To know
wasn't
if that's even a material amount, if it's just a one-off here and there. I mean,
like the transfer station was flagged by the auditors, but not these others. Maybe they didn't know.
Maybe they didn't.
Maybe. But auditors always are cyclical in what they look at for auditing, because they can't go into depth on everything at every town that they audit.
Yeah.
So they usually will pick and choose. This year, we're going to focus on X, Y, and Z. Next year, we might look at A, B, and C. So this year, the transfer station was on there. Next year, because we have police department revenue for fines and fees, they might choose that to look at. We don't know. That's the fun of an auditor. They pick and choose and just surprise you with what they're going to focus on, which is what we need them to do, because that's where we're going to truly find out whether we've failed in a certain area or not.
So Brennan,
So-
is that something that you could ask people about? You know, how do they handle it? What does it look like in terms of volume and work and the amount of money we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm thinking we probably have DPW, transfer station stuff coming in. We probably have permit fees that are coming in from planning and zoning. Again, I'm not aware that the police
Tickets
department.
for police?
I'm not sure how, to be honest with you, I don't know how those are collected. I don't know that those go to the town.
I think that those are collected at the state, and the state gives us money for those,
No,
for the tickets.
these are services performed by the police department here in town. They'll verify something, they'll verify a VIN number, or there's certain things that they charge for
They
along
charge
the way.
who? Like the car driver?
Yeah,
And then do I not write a check payable to the town of Norwich, or do I hand them cash? I mean,
you could do
I'm
either, I
confused.
guess. If you were to pay, you can pick either, but the traffic tickets and things like that go through the state. Those are the ones you're thinking of. They get to us, they get back to us, because we split the revenue of traffic tickets with the state, and they give us a piece of that for our revenue.
I'm sorry to be stupid, but I get a ticket. I'm told you have to pay.
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever it is. Because I never got a ticket, so I don't know. Okay, so say I write a check to the town of Norwich. How does the state know that they're supposed to get part of that check?
Maybe you don't write it to the town of
I don't
Norwich.
think you would write that ticket payment to the state, the town of Norwich.
Right.
Oh,
So
so,
that would have to go to the state of
so the
Vermont.
police would have to tell
And
me
then the
that I need
state
to make
gives
a
us
check
portion
payable
of
to
those
something
that
else.
reflect them.
How on earth do you keep track of that? I mean, honestly.
They have numerically controlled tickets, and they write them up and they send them in. They send a copy to the state, so the state's looking for that payment.
So historical memory, knock on wood, Linda, I remember in the past approving fees. Do we ever approve fees for like, the,
VIN number check or something?
yeah, for like the police doing a check for something? We don't do that? Okay.
She
So
doesn't know.
is-
I wouldn't- You've got Tracy Hall fees that come in, right? You've got Tracy Hall rental fees that come in?
That comes through the
You've got-
rec department. That's tracked through my rec, so I do get those.
No, they would be, Miranda is the one you schedule the use of Tracy Hall for the big stuff, that the women's club
Right, but
event.
the payment goes in through the rec department.
I don't know.
That's where I've seen it. I'm just looking at what I see on the GL.
I
So,
believe that's the case.
yeah,
But that's really
I
strange.
think Miranda is in charge of the facilitation of the rental.
Right.
That the rental comes
but the
through.
payment goes through my rec.
So let's just say we're gonna look at
That's weird.
fees.
I gotta look at that.
Okay,
Okay.
that
Hold
sounds
on.
fair.
Page 19, D10 and 11, I've highlighted collector of delinquent taxes adopted a policy, rate collection, and send regular notices. So we now know we have a collector of delinquent taxes policy. Brennan, do you think that needs review?
It probably needs review as much as any of the others.
Okay. Controls over purchasing and disbursements, page 23, item E. Yes?
That D10,
Yep.
it says neither the select board nor any other municipal official have authority to approve or disapprove of such policy.
Well, there's a collector of taxes by statute, unless your town votes to have the collector of delinquent taxes be the town manager, which we did. And so we don't have anything to say about that.
So previously, Priscilla, we had elected officials known as the delinquent tax collector,
Right.
elected. That person doesn't have to adhere to a select board policy. They can establish their own policy. But in
Okay.
this town manager form of government, we voted the town manager position to be the collector of current and the collector of delinquent taxes. So a
Okay.
select board policy is appropriate so that the town manager can follow the policies.
So we should work with this town manager on that one. So E, controls over purchasing and disbursements. This is page 23, E13. Are the duties segregated so the person writing the checks does not also open the bank statements?
Well, if the bank statements get put into my treasurer box, which is where they've gone for the last 27 years, most months, I get them and open those. And
Well,
I make a photocopy and keep it, and I turn the bank statement into the finance office. So where are we at? Page 23, E13.
24 on mine, but anyway.
So the person who writes the checks is the finance office. They do not and should not open the bank statements, which are addressed to the treasurer.
We keep acting as though the select board never approves warrant articles to, I thought you shouldn't sign checks unless they've been approved by the select board. Is that wrong?
No, that is absolutely correct.
Because that step has been omitted through our entire
Discussion, well, it's a step that I don't know.
Well,
I'll
taken for granted.
no,
Aha.
it's in here, but because we're doing it, I didn't
Okay.
point it out.
Well, it was pointed out in the audit that there were checks that were signed
No,
without warrant.
the board did not
The board
have
didn't-
signed warrants
Signed
on
warrants.
file.
Yeah, but that's a no-no, right?
It is a no-no, but apparently the town manager has rectified all of that. and
Correct.
gotten all that taken care of. Caught us up.
So, this says, every municipality should establish and maintain a segregation of duties that will ensure that payment functions and account reconciliation are carried out accurately, and that opportunities to commit fraud are limited. Persons involved in writing checks should not be involved in reconciliation. So that is true. That's,
Well, it depends on what you consider writing the checks. The finance office writes the checks, and then they go to the select board, or they get reviewed by the TM, and they go to the select board for approval and the treasurer to sign.
yeah.
Who is writing the checks, right? Who's writing it? The finance office is. So they do reconcile the bank account. So they are writing the checks and they are reconciling it.
Well, do we need to,
But if I get the bank reconciliation to review, which is what was done in the past, and I haven't pressed for this because there's been a lot going on. Trust me, it's something that goes through my head every month at a minimum, that I should ask for those, but I haven't. This is a great opportunity to bring that back.
Okay.
And
So-
just ask for that to be put in the treasurer's box every month and whenever it's done.
Did you just get the reconciliation report off from Nemrick?
You know what, Roberta would give it to me, Becky would give it to me.
But it just printed right out of Nemrick. So if
Yeah.
there were outstanding checks, you saw the list of the outstanding checks and stuff. Okay, yep,
so
I'm
now,
saving them.
so we've got under this, the select board authorizes the payment. The financial office writes the checks. The treasurer signs the checks. The bank statement is opened by,
The treasurer. The bank account is reconciled by the finance office.
But it's two different people in the finance office because the staff accountant writes the checks approved by the town manager and then goes to the select board, and then the bank statements are reconciled by the finance director, manager, whatever.
But the finance
But it's the
director has
same
been
office.
signing off on the warrants as well, which is not really critical, but,
who signs off on the warrants?
well, Ashley's been putting her name on the warrant. as reviewed or whatever. And then, but in the past, it was Fielding would sign that he's reviewed it all. So my point is, the person doing the checks reports to the finance director, right?
We just
So
need to make sure a procedure is in place that covers all the bases.
So I think there's probably enough segregation of duties here, and then the bank reconciliation should be reviewed by the town manager and given a copy to the treasurer. That would be my recommendation, but that's can be debated.
Okay, does that seem reasonable to you? Okay. Controls over payroll, I didn't do anything with that one because that doesn't really, I don't think that's as important right now.
Whoa.
What you do?
I would just like to touch on it for a minute.
Okay.
There is a process with payroll that accrues time off for individual employees. And I brought it up to Ashley recently that the use of that time off bucket is not getting reported consistently by employee. And I'll refer to holiday. Recently, holiday was paid for in February. And, you know, there was an accrual of so many holiday hours. The person used 8 hours appropriately, but there was no reduction in the accrual on the stub for that 8 hours of holiday, bringing it down to a different number. So I am very concerned about the accrual of earned time, holidays, whatever it is, sick time, all of those things that are in the payroll module that is not being accurately
Reflected.
Is that why we had an unanticipated expense? You mentioned recently about the accrued vacation time for the retiring town clerk?
Yeah, so the procedure right now, I guess, is that you can just bank kind of indefinite vacation time. And then at the time when you leave the employment of the town, you can cash that in. And I think that is a little unusual. I think there's normally
It's usually a cap.
a cap, right, and you can accrue so much a year, and then at the end of the year, I guess you could have a policy that said you either need to use that or you need to get paid out for that at the end of that year. You can't just roll that into the next year and the next, so.
I'm used to use it or lose it.
But
Well, I mean, again, that's our discretion, I
Right.
believe. But I think what's happened is suddenly, again, you have these multiple years of unused vacation time that needs to get paid out, and it normally gets paid out, you know, at the current salary rate. So it's a lot higher than when it was earned, and there's no way to go back and account for.
were you saying there was
You
supposed
earn this at X amount, but now you're at Y, and you only get X. So it's messy and it's
expensive.
It's expensive, yeah.
So you need to look at
was
that.
there a separate
Yeah, I think it's more
account
of
for
a
like
human
your
resource.
accrued vacation time?
Each employee is on an accrual basis, and I don't even know if the payroll module has it accurately entered. I'm just not sure. I'm not saying it isn't, I'm just not sure. And that when like if you have, let's just say you have 10 8-hour holidays,
Okay,
that's 80 hours.
yeah,
When you use one, it should then drop to 72 hours.
so you're keeping a separate little column for that?
It's on the pay stubs.
What are you doing?
Okay.
So NEMRIC does have the ability to have different buckets for the different times of, or different types of accrued. So holiday time would be in one bucket, vacation time would be in another bucket, sick time would be in another bucket, personal time, comp time. So we have all those buckets that are tracked in NEMRIC. NEMRIC is not set up for all people to be created equal in the system because of all of the time that has elapsed over when some people started working and when people have been onboarded recently. Accrual policies have changed. So people don't have the same accrual amounts in there. So when you add the union in there, then you've got another piece that certain people have different accrual buckets than what the regular town's employees have.
How do you keep track?
So it does need to be looked at, and it does need to be standardized and policies do need to be put in place for that.
So that looks to me like a personnel policy.
It is in the personnel policy, and when I looked at this in NEMRIC does not have everybody according to that personnel policy.
Of course.
So
Well,
it's a
NEMRIC
matter of who's grandfathered in, who has to get moved to that. I mean, so it's definitely, for this conversation, it needs to be looked at, and policy needs to be reviewed. The personnel policy needs to be reviewed for all of those accrual buckets.
Well, to that point, NEMRIC doesn't do anything. We put the information into NEMRIC the way it's supposed to be put in, and I give you the fact that it probably should not be on automatic accruals, that it should be carefully looked at by employee, because you're right, there's too many, I mean, with union employees versus non-union, you've got to watch what is getting done, so that, but I've just noticed it going the other way, which is reducing the column that says, you've got 80 hours, you've used 8, now it should say 72 hours, but it still says 80 hours. So if that was something you got paid out for when you leave, you'd get 80 hours instead of 72.
Yeah.
And it's a concerning piece to me because
And another piece of that is some people are set up to be automatically accrued, and some people are put in there at a period of time, you bank so many hours. So that's another variation in the system. That's why I said that all of that needs to be looked at. It needs to be spelled out in a policy, and then we need to go into NEMRIC and make sure that each current employee is set up properly.
But the problem is the accrued amounts, going back to your point, that don't ever get used. I know at the fire district, we have a policy of comp time. And if they can't get the chance to use their comp time earned this year at $25 an hour, we pay it out, because we don't want to pay it out at $27.50 next year.
Right.
So my question now is, how long do you think it will take to do? I'm looking for the future, I'm not thinking that you're going to get this done in April. So
I'm looking to get funds and grants done in April.
But how long do you think it would take to get every single person up to speed based on our current personnel policies? Because it looks like it's a by-hand job.
It is a by-hand job. We have to enter data for each bucket of accrual according to what the policy is for each person.
But how long do you think that would take? Any idea?
How many employees do we have?
Yeah, I don't know how many employees we've got.
2 dozen,
Yeah. I would say it could probably be done in a day if somebody just devotes their time to that, and they have the policy to know, who's grandfathered in, who is in which of the buckets.
Right.
So that's the time taker, not the entering it into the system. The time taker is defining who has X dollar amount, and we should have it as a period in time. So I believe some of the people's accruals started in January and some started in July, for instance. So as of July, what is everybody supposed to have? And then after we finish the June payroll, we can go in and say, okay, now we're going to adjust everybody's accrual buckets, all the different buckets, to this amount, because they have been here this many times, or they're a union member, or whatever. Criteria needs to be fit in there to make those accrual times work.
Every month?
No, we enter it in once, and then the system will track it properly.
Okay.
But I think employees that are going to be adjusted need to be clearly involved in what they believe they've got earned versus what we want to adjust to make sure. Now, again, another simplistic way to look at it is you assume on July 1st, everybody working full-time is going to be around for the next year. So you give them the 80 hours of holiday time. If they leave at the end of December, well, they're not going to earn, and they're not going to be paid out for those holidays they didn't get to.
Right.
But they've got paid for the ones that they were here for. So you just make that 0 and they're gone. But vacation time or sick or whatever else is going to be your hot topic.
Right.
Well, thank you.
And
for
that's
pointing
where
that out.
I would recommend that the town goes on to an accrual basis. So you are accruing time for what you are worked, so that you're not having to pay out vacation time that's been banked in July when you leave in August.
Yeah, and maybe we want to think about like a.
So that should be written in the policy.
Right.
which, and I haven't looked at that part of the personnel policy in a long time, so
Well,
I
we're
don't
going
remember
to.
what it says, but we definitely need to review that.
Okay,
And-
all right, that was great.
Thank you for letting me bring that
Well,
up.
thank you for bringing it up.
Okay.
Controls under G, over the grand list and tax records, page 26, G3. The select board, the tax treasurer, the tax collector processes for collecting and recording tax payments. We talked about that, I think, a little bit. So I think we need to fully delineate how this is going to be done. Because number G5 on page 27 talks about getting duplicate receipts, that when people pay their taxes, checks are endorsed right away on receipt and deposits made daily. I think we need to work on this policy and make sure we all understand how that's going to work.
Okay, so one thing I'll mention right up front is the grand list module is the module of NEMRIC that prints the tax bills. However, we give the finance office the authorization to do that so that the listers are not involved in anything to do with the tax bills and the collection of taxes, which it's not implying here, but when people think of grand list, they think listers.
Right.
So, so we're not involved when we give it finance access to that feature, so they can print and then they move the data that they've printed over to the tax receivable module, and they collect it and record it in a receivable module.
So we change that to the finance office. So that means you have established adequate processes for collecting and recording the taxes. Okay, and
But
then,
we don't have them documented.
I was gonna say.
We do them, but writing it down.
They're not
is
written.
what needs to happen.
will be written. Okay,
And again, I would substitute town manager in there for treasurer, because I am not a collector of any taxes. So
I'm kind of using finance office as shorthand for town manager,
with
just
the
because.
G3 over here, when this says, this is, well, this is really town manager. I'm going to convince you at some point.
I will think of them as one, but I
I'm
know
gonna
that the
print the
finance
town
office is
manager
doing the
statute.
work.
Well, I think it's a delegation of the duty, right?
Right.
So
It's a delegation.
in statute, it's the town manager. By kind of convenience, it's the finance director working
Yeah.
and reporting to the town manager.
Okay, you just got that one, town manager. All right, and then what about this 27, page 27, G5? Are receipts listed in duplicate, issued in duplicate for all tax payments that are received? Yes or no?
No.
Yes,
Yes.
because we give the taxpayer a receipt, and we also record that in our documented files. So
Okay.
we have a copy and they have a copy. I assume that's what that's directing.
What copy do you have?
We have a digital copy so Ashley creates the receipt, we record it in our digital files, and we print that and give it to the taxpayer.
And then when you get
Again,
the
not
check,
written down.
right, and when you get the check, you endorse it and the deposits are made daily?
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, well, if someone's here, if the finance office is not staffed for 2 days of the week, how are deposits being made daily?
We deposit them the day we receive them.
But if there's nobody in the office, how can
Then we're
you,
not receiving it that day.
well,
Somebody just put it in the
Where is it?
box outside?
where does it go?
I don't know where it goes.
That's a question that would be helpful to know.
I
Well, we have
thought,
a box.
we do have a box, but I thought that, because I was wondering about this for the February tax payment, and I thought somebody said, well, we've made arrangements that Ashley will be here every day this week so people can come in.
Yes, right.
That's another way to handle it, right?
Yeah, we did that during that week of
February.
the taxes were due in February.
Of course, if
right.
she gets a thing at 4:30, it's not gonna be deposited that day.
Well, that day, she did do it that day.
She did?
She
Oh, the night
stayed
deposit?
until, what, 8 o'clock
Oh,
on
the night
that
deposit
tax
box?
due date to make sure everything that we received
Okay.
was processed into the system, and then put in the bank in a Dropbox.
Yes. Oh, okay.
But logically, it's like mail. If I send mail with the check in it, it's gonna sit in your box until you come to open it. And then,
But in the town, we have one mailbox, so all that's at the mailbox brought over to Tracy Hall and stuffed into a box out here in the town clerk's area, which would be all the tax. So if the week of collection, Ashley was here every day, the weeks before that, she wasn't.
Right.
So there were days where many, many tax receipts came in, but were not processed.
Right.
so should there be a separate box for the finance office? A mailbox?
Well, there is you're talking about in person or just mail coming in?
Mail coming in.
Oh.
Do you mean like a box outside Tracy Hall?
I mean, we're what, box 376 now?
No, you don't want to change that.
Gets all
Well, I mean,
correspondence.
when mail comes to this,
Yeah, then it would get dispersed between the different departments, is my understanding.
so a little man doesn't come with the mail, does he? And-
No,
No,
We have a PO
I
box,
think
remember?
we go across the street, I think.
Okay, and so whoever brings the mail across,
Yeah, and then if it said town manager, it would, I guess, go into the town manager's
you've got a
internal box.
pigeonhole.
Yes, we have a pigeonhole. So I think that's the box, right? I mean, in my mind.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, that would be easier than setting up a whole new PO and having a new
Yeah.
mailing address.
No, so I was just thinking whoever brings over the
Yeah.
mail puts it in pigeonholes.
Right,
So
and
you've got your own box.
And it's documented
That
where
sounds-
that was intended to go. If it goes to the wrong place,
but
I would hope, it gets moved
Right.
back. So if it went to the treasurer's office, but it was actually the finance department, it would go,
Yeah.
Cheryl would have to open that and say, okay, that's finance department, and
Right.
move it over, vice versa, throughout anybody really in Tracy Hall.
That's reasonable.
Yeah, I think that's a.
well, in the not too distant past, there was vacation time taken during the period of time where taxes were collected. So you've got now 5 days of receipts coming into the mailbox. That's probably this thick. And they ended up being taken by the town clerk because she has a vault. And she never opened them, but she took the stack and kept them in her vault until a vacation was finished. And all of those payments were sitting there, waiting to be opened and posted.
So maybe we need a policy about rules around vacation time coinciding with things like tax
Oh,
payments.
that sounds good.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's true, but the other thing is, whether or not we're past a point where, working remotely for that office makes sense. Maybe that's just another piece that could be looked at.
But I think, we'll just put that down as something to be addressed. The last item on page 3, we've already talked about, it's the access to financial information is limited to those who are specifically required to access that information. On page 4, we're down to 2 official things and one last question from me. On page 29, I2, access to financial information is protected by the use of passwords that are regularly changed. True or not true?
Not true.
Okay, we need to develop a policy.
So my understanding on this one is that that Becky made up a password for the Nemrick cloud, and we're still using that password. And can you say today that you and Ashley are the only two that have access to the financial modules?
No, because I don't have management ability to go in and see the back end to know who has access or not.
So that was my question down below. Does
So
every
that
system have an
needs, yeah,
administrator?
that needs policy information written about that.
So are you saying that people before you came in still would have access?
I don't know. They shouldn't have.
But you don't know
But
yet.
we could
I
call
know that
Nemrick,
Fielding-
we
I
can
know that-
call Nemrick, and Nemrick can say, these people have access. Who do you want and who don't you want?
In this policy, we need to have designation of who is responsible for managing the NEMRIC module.
Yeah.
Because other places I have worked, there is usually a controller or a CFO that is designated as the management control
Yeah.
for the financial system.
Me too.
I've not seen that here. I know that in the finance director's job description, it talks about managing the GL, and I think it said managing the finance department, or finance system, but I don't have that access. Whether a permanent person would have that access or not would be another case, but I think that that needs to be part of this policy that we create, just to address that.
Yeah.
Just make sure it's clear.
Yeah,
Well, it was clear that the finance director did have access to the supervisor level password, which is the ultimate one, in any module, because I was eliminated from the general ledger after the departure, and I did not get access again until Brennan helped me regain access. When I went to Nemrick to ask for, I think I forgot my password for general ledger, which can happen, there were still 4 people that had access, and I was not one of them.
so Brennan, I'm wondering, is it reasonable to say that in the development of the personnel functions for Miranda, that she may be the person who has that sort of administrator access and and do the granting of, no,
No,
not her?
Nemrick, because
No.
Yeah,
Miranda
Nemrick-
doesn't use Nemrick.
Nemrick's its own kind of
Okay.
world of the finance
Yeah.
department and treasurer.
Okay.
So I mean, I talked to somebody at Nemrick early in my tenure and was trying to, I think it was when we were trying to get Cheryl
probably.
realigned. I mean, I think it makes sense to have the finance director as the key contact there, and then they disseminate out, again, as Joyce said, how and who gets to use each module. And some people might have full access to one module, but no access to another, and that would probably be, again, discretionary on the director.
I would say that that should be part of the job description, like, you know, access for this job description is ABC.
Well, that would be the onboarding,
Right.
or the onboarding
But if it's in the
documentation.
job description for that person, then you don't have to think about it every time, it's just automatic.
Yeah,
We know that
unless
they-
it changed or morphed or something over time, would
Right.
be the only
But then we'd have
downside
to,
of that.
I
I mean, we're talking about a pretty small group of people too.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about really three,
Right, and that's
4
where-
people, I guess.
right, I
The
would-
clerk has access as well.
Right.
Yeah, I think Bonnie wants control over her town clerk modules.
Yeah.
I think the finance office wants control over their modules, and I know the listers want control over their module.
right.
So
So we have to have one system administrator.
Right.
And that's what we're looking for. Who's going to be that system administrator that needs to be spelled out in this
Who
policy?
turns the switch on for this, on for that?
Correct, and it has to be part
I
of
don't
both
think
the
that's true.
onboarding and the offboarding documentation process, because that's the only way you can keep up with the managing who's leaving and who's coming.
Well, I
For the
do think
different
there needs to be
departments.
a central person. I
Not when
mean,
not when you have elected officials who are running their offices. We can do our modules, we do not need to share what we do for setup, but we can share the modules as needed by any other department
you're not
that need
sharing
it.
them. You're basically, you're using your modules and saying, I've just hired Marie Elise, give her the access. Because,
Right,
How
and
many
that's part of the
administrators-
onboarding process,
right,
so.
how many
Well, there's no-
administrators can you have?
There's no reason for anybody to give, that's not your best example. Okay, because it's an elected capacity, right?
Right.
Right? So when we had new listers come in, they need to know if they wish to be in the grand list module, how to access it.
Right, so.
We don't need an outside individual orchestrating that.
No, but we have
But we
one
do.
system, and we have, I think it has one administrator, is that true or
No.
not?
I don't know,
They're all individual.
I will check with Nemrick. Traditionally, or outside, what I've usually seen is you have one administrator
too.
for the system. And then as part of the onboarding and offboarding documents, you have a list of this is what this person needs access to, whether they're hired, whether they are volunteer, whatever job function they're doing for that
Yeah.
entity, should be on that onboarding
Right.
form. And then they sign to say, yep, I'm taking responsibilities for that. And in that, you say, yes, I also need to have password access for this. And you're responsible to keep
Yeah.
your passwords private.
See, in my last job, I would say, I was in charge of who got what in my office,
Yep.
but I didn't turn the switch.
Right.
I just said, Sally needs A, B, C, D, Joe needs these things, and tell the administrator, and they flip the switch.
So the difference is, we do not have that. The difference
Right
is,
now,
we don't have it. We can't have it. There isn't one person flipping a switch
Well,
in
that's
the
what we're
IT
talking
department.
about.
Right, but that's not what you need here. What you need is a understanding of the modules and who needs access to them. Okay, that would be a help. And for instance, the grand list module, the finance department needs that, right? So we give them that. The town clerk needs it for these things. And the listers get a password for them and then designate the boxes that they can click, that they can get to when they want to go in and use that.
And that sounds like multiple administrators for one
It's by module, well, that's the way it is. There is no module for all of these.
Oh, I know.
But there
I
is,
get that.
NEMRIC does have the ability to have a system administrator that assigns certain modules to people. So that system administrator, the overall, is what we're looking for, who's going to be the overall manager to say, yep, Cheryl has access to grant people access for the lister's office, but Cheryl doesn't have, or the lister's module, but Cheryl doesn't have access to grant abilities in a module for the town clerk's office, for instance.
Which is
But
basically what you get
somewhere,
now.
somebody has got to have the overall ability to say, yes, this person has access to NEMRIC, and they've gone through the proper channels to get access to our version of NEMRIC.
And we also need a procedure for what happens when that system administrator leaves.
Yes.
Well, I'm very confused, but I would say that the town manager would be the person looking at the employees of the town as to who needs what. When you get to elected officials, we got it. We got what we'll do, and we can document
policy.
it. We can document it.
Yeah, we'll write the
Again,
policy.
you saw in here,
Yeah,
elected officials do not have to follow select board policies, but it's great to do it together as best we
Right.
can.
That's
So I think we can agree, but I think we may work out a way that we agree on.
yep. I mean, I used to say at my last job, we're all swimming in this same big pool, and we all have to figure out how to use the data, but you never cross my line and I never cross your line. There are firewalls, and you'll have your firewall, but let's get that policy drafted. I think this is a very important one. Okay, and the last one was computer records are regularly backed up and copies stored off-site. I think I heard it's all in the cloud. Is that true?
It is.
Yes? Are we all?
And it's automatically backed up, right? Because we don't have to go in through any steps to back that up?
No, I think it's automatically.
I think they probably
backed up,
overnight it, you know, they.
However often it happens.
That's part of the CCI, right? Well, plus
CCI
NEMRIC, I know
is
does their own.
a little different, yeah. The CCI is a regular, redundant backup. So there's always two
Okay.
copies of things, and if you lost your original, you could have a backup.
The NEMRIC's not backed up by CCI.
No,
No.
NEMRIC's, I'm sure, doing that on their
We
own.
pay NEMRIC.
Internally.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So, does anybody have anything that I didn't bring up? We're at 2 minutes to 3.
Hold on, I'll just quickly, I think you hit most of the things that I
I
wrote.
want to commend you, Marcia, on putting this together, which I think saved us 3 hours.
I don't think,
Having a roadmap for this,
thank you.
it's quite a bit.
And my only suggestion is substituting town manager instead of finance officer as far as the direction of authority there. And I get the finance office is doing it, but purchase orders, I mean, I feel like purchase orders are another area for improvement, and maybe that'll come out of the purchasing policy, but I'm not sure we have any pre-numbered purchase orders. I don't believe they are pre-numbered. I think they're manually numbered, and that would be something to be helpful.
So what, I'm thinking, what do we have for takeaways for today? And when we come back with our answers for those takeaways,
Well,
what is the next schedule, I guess?
I could try and sort of make a distillation of what we talked about today with to-do lists for people. You kind of know what your to-do lists are, I would think, but we could then, can I do this for Monday? we could come back for Monday and just review that and then send it to the board on the 12th.
As our plan of action.
Yeah,
I think it would be great to move this quickly, because there are other tasks there that are gonna
yeah,
stack up as well.
right. And this feeds into so many other things. And I'm cognizant of your imminent departure.
Yeah. So Monday, might be a very busy day. But do we want to do this again where we would meet at 1 o'clock or whatever time as a group and reconfirm that this is how we want this to go forth to the select board?
Yeah, I mean.
When does something
I think
have to
so.
get in, ready for the packet? To have to be
Well, we
Monday
can-
in the day, right? Or does it need to be?
We
before that?
usually have the packet out Friday afternoon, but we can always add things to the packet if we need to.
You could do an addendum to the packet.
Right. I mean, I'll try and put this together
You didn't
tomorrow.
want a weekend, did you?
Never have a weekend.
So are we talking about?
Well, if we don't
meeting
need to
Monday?
reconvene, then maybe it's just everybody looks at this electronically and
That's true.
offers comments, and maybe
That's true.
that speeds up the process.
Is that okay with everybody? I just send it and you look at it on your computer?
But is it gonna go into the packet? Is that your goal? Is that what you were
That's
saying?
the goal.
So before it goes in the packet, I guess I'd like to have a chance to edit.
Well, I would send it
So-
out. Is that enough?
Yeah, no, but as long as you're willing to consider edits
Yeah.
before it goes out, before it goes in the packet, that would be all my ask.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this body has any open meeting law preclusion, so I think we could,
Well, if you-
debate the merits or make comments or suggestions as a group, and
Mhm.
If Marcia sent it to us and we wrote just back to you, or would we write to everybody? Write to just Marcia?
I mean, that's what Brennan was just saying. We're doing this open meeting law format right now because why not?
Why not?
Right?
Totally.
But I don't think, we don't have a quorum of anybody here, and we're not making any decisions, we're making recommendations, which are gonna go to the packet, and they'll be public for everyone to see. So all we're doing is, I hate the term wordsmithing, but we're just sort of doing that.
Yep.
So I don't think we need to meet in person again.
Right, but if we have a chance, or as an email exchange with edits, a group thing or a one-on-one thing? Because I don't know how that's all I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, you can send them to me or I can do a Word document. Is everybody comfortable with doing the track changes?
I don't know. I don't think I've ever done it.
what
It
if,
does get
just as a solution, I mean, I think if you just sent your reply to all,
Mhm.
and then everybody could see it and comment again.
Okay,
I mean, in a normal public body situation, we couldn't do that, but again, I think we're acknowledging that
Yeah.
this is not in the same open meeting law jurisdiction.
Well,
right,
either that or I just submit an edited version while you submit it to the select board packet. I submit an edited version to the select board packet, and we can go that way, but it seems
Let's
more
not do
cumbersome.
that. That's
Yeah, I mean, that just seems more cumbersome.
yeah,
very much so.
yeah, we'll try and get it all in there. I mean, yeah, I'll figure it out. Just
Okay.
send me your stuff. Okay, was this useful?
It was.
Good, good.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Cedar, for doing this.
Yeah.
And that concludes our working group session here.
No motion to adjourn, right?
No motion to adjourn, we're a working group, we are not a
Okay.
committee.
Okay.
Talking about swimming.
Swimming?
My daughter is now in Bali with her husband, and they passed through Doha with a 10-hour layout. This is the swimming pool at the spa in the Doha airport.
It out. How beautiful.
Joyce, were you able to
Oh,
get the bonus
I mean,
piece
is
worked
that
out?
enormous?
Is it in this
And
payroll?
she sent me some more pictures.
Yes.
From the Doha.
The
She said
bonus piece is
Doha
in this
airport is
payroll?
crazy.
That would-
Yep.
Everybody
I mean,
that was-
desert, right?
So that
These
got
pictures.
handled
That's
before it got done, okay.
Yeah.
Yep, we got
This
that
is
done.
the interior of the
I
document.
do have,
Lord.
check for you to sign,
Obscene.
county bond.
Over the
I read through and I got that reconciled, for the FY
That's why I
Are
was
you
stuff,
kidding me?
because we
That's why I
have
was joking, they
a
probably have a
prepaid
ski
in
resort.
22.
Well, I think
and
they
had to
do.
move into
One of these
23, and then we
countries
have
does,
a
I've
payment
read,
for
yes.